sweet potatoes. How do you grow them? How do you grow them? I live in Canada. How am I supposed to know? How about we find out together? I like this song. Oh, wait. I think I got it. A quick bit of research, and we find out quite a few interesting things about sweet potatoes. Turns out, they aren't even closely related to regular potatoes, or even nightshades at all. In fact, they're in the morning glory family. As such, sweet potatoes actually grow as herbaceous perennial vines, which we'll need to consider when we get to that point. We also know that they're native to tropical Central and South America. So that's also going to affect the way that we grow these guys. But first things first, let's discuss how we're going to propagate these things from an existing sweet potato from the grocery store. A quick search on the tube reveals that there's two popular methods to reproducing sweet potatoes. These starchy tubers differ from regular potatoes in that they propagate from adventitious shoots called slips that sprout from the sweet potato tuber itself. Each large sweet potato tuber can produce upwards of 50 or more slips, and there's two ways to induce it. I'll first show you the way that I didn't like, followed by a much easier method that I obviously much prefer. The first method is not complicated at all, and actually, it's probably the quicker of the two strategies. First, you need to find the shoot end of that tuber. It's generally more pointy, as the root end often ends in a stub. After you've located the shoot end, you can cut it off anywhere from 2 to 4 inches from the tip. The bigger you cut it, usually the more slips you get. You can see why, because the slips themselves sprout from defined areas on the tuber. After you've cut off that shoot end, submerge it about an inch deep in a tapered glass of water and watch the slips develop. It's just that easy. The method that I'm going to use, however, is more in line with traditional potato propagating. I begin by placing my sweet potato in a warm, dark cupboard. The ones beside your dishwasher actually work the best. Within a month, without actually doing anything, the number of slips produced should be numerous and plentiful. Sweet potatoes really are quite prolific, and if you haven't peeked in on them, it's actually quite amazing to see how many grow. The slips are easily removed by hand, and if any of them are fused together, now would be the time to separate them. Looks like I got 7 big slips and 5 smaller ones for 12 total just off this one tuber. Now, you can plant these guys right away, but if you're in a pinch or you don't have the space yet like I do, the slips can grow in water no problem for at least a few more weeks. These are vine growers, so don't stress about the orientation, as they will right themselves in short order. I don't know about you, but this is starting to look an awful lot like a shrimp cocktail. Even after only 3 days, the roots begin to pop out. And within a week, white roots are everywhere. 2 weeks out is the ideal time that I've found to plant these guys, and looking at the root development, you can see why. Really, these guys rival tomatoes in their adventitious root production. If you do leave them in water longer, The slip will continue to grow, with the roots growing up to 6 inches long. There doesn't seem to be any benefit of letting him get to this stage, however. Finally, after 6 weeks total time invested, we're ready to plant. For soil, any base potting or container mix will do, with a few modifications. I make my own, so I start with a 50-50 compost coconut fiber mixture, followed by an addition of about 10% sand. These guys love drainage, and the sand really does help. Also, steer clear of heavily fertilizing your soil with any nitrogen. You'll get a root shoot explosion, and it'll be at the risk of stunting your tubers. Don't learn this the hard way. I will, however, add in a mix of rock phosphate, rock dust, and Epsom salt to beef it up a bit, but that's about all I do. Oh, and another thing, sweet potatoes do like it slightly acidic, so I add a handful of elemental sulfur just to lower that pH slightly. Your rooted slips can go straight into your containers or ground, provided that the soil temperatures are above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, these guys are highly tropical. For me, I'm going to create a batch of well-established starter plants before final planting. So, I start by setting up my standard 4-inch nursery pots. For planting the slips, I fill the pots about 1/3 full of that aforementioned soil mixture. Once the pots are all set up with the soil, I soak them from below for about an hour. I do this because we are planting bare rootstock and I want to avoid transplant shock as much as possible. We'll begin by planting the overgrown slip first, as that'll be the most annoying one to do. Place that slip right in the middle of the pot low enough to ensure that the roots will be below the soil line, and begin filling in and around it with that same potting mix. Hold the stem as vertical as possible with your free hand, and if you're steady enough, these slips basically pot themselves. Compress the soil firmly but carefully around the slip, and that's 1 down, 11 to go. Here's one of the more normal 2-week ones that you're likely going to encounter. Again, place the slip right in the middle of that pot and just fill all around it with your soil. It's a little bit finicky, yeah, I do admit it, but if you've added that sand and if your coconut fiber isn't too wet, it should go relatively quickly. Like tomatoes, if you've inadvertently buried some of that stem or some of those lower leaves, don't worry. These guys can take it, and they'll just keep growing anyways. The main thing you want to focus on is burying those roots that have already popped out and orienting the stem part as upright as possible. Do those 2 things and you will be successful. Really, when you're working with adventitious roots like this, it's pretty difficult to mess up this stage. Just finishing off the last one. So far, in my limited experience, sweet potatoes seem quite vigorous and easy to work with. I've always wanted to grow them, but because I live in Canada and because of their temperature requirements, I never took that leap of faith to try. I'm really glad that I'm trying these sweet potatoes now, however, as my gardening techniques have become refined over the years and my general gardening knowledge has really increased. Well, that wasn't too bad. We got all the slips potted up. We're just going to do 12 at this time. So let's let these guys get established and firmly rooted over the next 2 weeks. In the meantime, we'll figure out our spacing, soil, light, and heat for the final containers as we grow these young plants into full sweet potato crops. Given where I live and the time of year it is right now, we're gonna have to do the second part indoors, which should be a fun challenge. So if you're following along, get those slips going, rooted and into soil. And when we next catch up, we'll look at the final planting, the care, the maintenance, the watering, all that good stuff, and of course the harvest. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. If you're getting value in this and the other series that I'm doing on YouTube, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons if you'd be so kind, and I'll see you in the next video.